everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Common Sense Practical Prepper. My name is Keith. If this is your second time here for the second episode, welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. Today we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about what the supply chain is and give a very simple real-world example that almost all of us can understand. And then we're going to talk about what a prepper is, what a prepper isn't. All right, supply chain. Now, we've been hearing for the last two and a half years about supply chain issues, the reason why certain things are not on the shelves, the reason why it's difficult to get a new car, a new truck. We're hearing it's all because of supply chain issues. With your vehicles, it's primarily the microprocessors, the chips that go into the computers that run your engine. All right, so let's talk about supply chain as it relates to a cup of coffee. All right, so we're down in Colombia. Juan Valdez and his donkey are out in the fields. They have planted the coffee beans, and now it is time to pick the coffee beans. So they take the little beans off the plant, and Juan Valdez and all of his workers, they put into baskets. They put the baskets into trucks. And the trucks take these beans, who knows, 5 miles or 55 miles away to a processing plant. All right, in this processing plant, they're going to be dried. They're going to be either put through a machine or put out in the sun to dry. And then after a couple weeks, the hull or the skin, I guess, of the coffee bean breaks apart, and then that goes off to the side as waste. And now we have just the bean itself. Okay, the beans then have to be milled. Okay, they're going to be graded. They're going to be polished because they have to look good, because when these coffee buyers come in, they don't want to look at a bunch of dirty coffee beans. Kind of like the apples at the grocery store. There's a heavy coat of wax. It's just why your apples look all nice and shiny, because they're more appealing to the eye, more appealing to the consumer. Okay, so now they're milled, and then now they have to be roasted. A million different ways to roast coffee, depending on the bean, how it's roasted, and then you end up with, your dark coffee beans, your light coffee beans, whatever blend of coffee beans there are. Now that we have that done, it needs to be packaged. So it's going to be put into burlap bags or whatever they ship coffee in. So it goes in burlap bags, goes on a truck, and it's then driven to a port. Some port workers go ahead and put those into containers, in a container ship, and then it takes several days, however long, to move across whatever body of ocean, and it lands somewhere here in the United States. So now it's going to go to a warehouse. Distributors come around. It goes into different trucks, and let's say we're talking about Dunkin' Donuts. So the Dunkin' Donut trucks show up. They grab the coffee. It goes to the warehouse. It's then put on other smaller trucks, and then it's distributed all over the United States to all the little Dunkin' Donut shops. They go ahead and grind it. They put it in the machine. They run hot water over it. Yep, and there's your coffee. Okay. In that relatively simple example, there were, my goodness, probably 10 to 15 different places in that supply chain where a slight delay or a break in the supply chain is going to significantly impact when that coffee bean is going to arrive at your local Dunkin' Donut. You have the truck drivers probably in 4 or 5 different sections of this supply chain. Anytime there's an interruption there, labor disputes, civil disputes, you're going to have a delay in getting that coffee bean to wherever it's on the way to. It's on the way to the factory, on the way to the port, on the way to the warehouse, or on the way to, your local Dunkin' Donuts. So it's a very fragile situation, and that is a very simple example. All the different steps that something as simple as a coffee bean has to take, all the way from, Colombia in South America to, your Dunkin' Donuts in Anaheim, California. So it's a lot of times we take it for granted, like, oh, a cup of coffee, and we get it every day, and we don't think a whole lot about it. But the supply chain is very, very fragile. The further the initial things are sourced, the initial parts are sourced, the more opportunity there is for some sort of breakdown. Now we're talking about just a coffee bean ending up in a cup of coffee. We're not talking about a truck. We're not talking about a car. We're not talking about a computer where multiple parts for this computer are sourced by multiple companies in multiple countries. You talk about batteries, all the rare earth material, rare earth minerals that are used in, let's say, a Tesla battery or something like that. Those rare earth minerals are found in just very few places on Earth, and the interruption in the supply chain for any one of those many rare earth minerals is going to throw the whole battery supply chain, manufacturing chain, into a tailspin. So very, very fragile. We can do the same example for food. So corn in the Midwest, the corn has to be planted. It has to be fertilized. And we talk about, the war between Russia and the Ukraine. A large percentage of the world's fertilizer comes from Russia. So obviously the fertilizer doesn't get here to be put on the corn. The corn's not going to be, as tasty. It's not going to be well received by the customers. The purchasers are like, that's a really weak piece of corn, that sort of thing. So, and then you have the water. Is there a drought in the area? The farmer's not able to water the plants. You have, again, transportation, several different steps to get the corn transported. We're talking corn on the cob, that shows up at your local store. We're talking about canned corn, whole different set of supply chain issues. We're talking about the metal, the tin, that has to be sourced for the cans, the labels, it just goes on and on and on. So it's very, very fragile type of situation here. All right, let's talk about prepping, what prepping is and what prepping is not. So very basic. Let's say the last time in your particular area you had a severe snowstorm or a type of situation, let's say a hurricane, and you had, 5 or 6 days lead time on the hurricane coming ashore, and then, a couple, 3 days out, they're able to pretty much pinpoint landfall. And what happens? Even people that live in, let's say the United States, live off the coast of Miami, North, South Carolina, even Virginia Beach, Norfolk, the Tidewater area, are very used to hurricanes. It's hurricane season now, and, hurricane tropical storms, they're going to be coming through here in pretty short order. 90% of the people in these areas are not prepared at all for a situation like this, even though they've probably lived through 10 hurricanes in their lifetime. 90% of these people are not prepared. And it seems kind of weird. Like, hey, you live in Miami or you live in Daytona Beach. You guys are pretty used to hurricanes, right? Why don't you have 3 days of food, 3 days of water, extra propane cylinder for your grill, that sort of thing. It's really, and several years ago, I guess I was kind of in that same boat. I was the person that was, oh my goodness, I need to get to, Home Depot because the snow's coming. Oh, I don't have a snow shovel. I need to get some ice melt. Everybody, when there's a bad snowstorm, everybody gets eggs, milk, and bread because apparently the only thing you can make is French toast in a snowstorm. If you are the type of person that has a couple extra cases of water, buys a couple of the big packs of 36 roll of toilet paper at your bulk store, then you're a prepper. Now, certainly not in the term that, the stereotypical prepper, you don't have to be living off grid. You don't have, 16 years of food, 200 pounds of rice, 600 pounds of beans. You don't have to, drink water out of your water barrels and, slaughter the pigs and the chickens in the backyard to eat. You don't have to have 16 guns and crossbows and deer stands and all that sort of thing to be considered a prepper. It's very, very simple. And it's not that difficult. Like I said in episode 1, we're hurricane season. So you're here on the East Coast, you grab an extra case of water, an extra 8-pack of toilet paper, a couple of gallons of spring water or distilled water. Grab a flashlight and a couple sets of batteries, a hand crank radio. You can listen to, the news. Your internet's going to go down. Your power goes down, internet's go down. You still might have the cell towers, but, they're on backup generators, but eventually the cell towers are going to go down. So how are you going to listen, to anything coming across the radio as far as getting, guidance from, local emergency services? So it's not difficult. You don't have to spend a lot of money. So just grab something extra every time you go to the store or every other time you go to the store. And I know the government recommends like a 3-day supply of everything, kind of at the minimum. So I believe, depending on what website you go to, they recommend 2 gallons of water per person per day. I mean, that kind of adds up. If you have, mom and dad and a couple of kids, so you've got 4. So you need, 8 gallons of water for that household. So for that 3 days, that's 24 gallons. That takes up a little space. So you have, 24, 1-gallon jugs? Or you get, the 2 gallons or 5 gallons, that sort of thing. All sorts of different ways you can store water, especially if you have a little bit of lead time. And, we'll talk about that on a different episode when we talk specifically about, how much water, how much food, that sort of thing. So the basic is just 3 days. So assume electricity is out in a widespread area. Very soon after the electricity goes out, the county or the city is not going to be able to process, wastewater into, drinkable water or potable water. Water supply system could be compromised. There could be a break in some of the lines, very low pressure, no pressure. And so you're going to need to get a supply of water. We'll talk about personal hygiene later on. Again, we're just keeping, these first few episodes and probably a lot of the episodes just to the basics. And then after you get to 3 days, work it up to a week. And if it takes several weeks or several months to go from 3 days to a week, then that's fine. And then you want to work up to, a month. And for a family of 4, when you're talking about a month, that can be a lot of water. That can be a lot of food. And it really just depends on the kind of food that you've purchased. You're not going to go out and buy 100 boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese and, 6 pounds of Vienna sausages. And there's ways you can go about it. There's ways you can consolidate. You can look up, freeze drying, dehydrating, vacuum sealing, canning. Again, we're getting way, way ahead of, what very, very simple prepping is. But again, it doesn't have to be difficult. Just grab a few extra things when you go to the store, and you'll be very surprised, in very short order, and stick it into a closet. You got your 2 or 3 cases of water at the bottom of the closet. You got a few gallons of water you picked up, some sodas, big thing of Country Time, powdered lemonade. That's going to go a long way. Stuff like that. Not very difficult at all. Anyway, folks, I appreciate you hanging out with me. And this is episode 2 of the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. And again, everybody be safe. Take care of one another. And until next time.